If you've been DMing Dungeons & Dragons for a while, you've probably had a player character die during one of the adventures. And when that happens, you may have experienced that the player isn't all that bothered that the characters died, especially not if they're at higher level, because if you can cast Revivify, Raise Dead, Resurrection, Reincarnation, and all that stuff, dying isn't really all that bad. Of course, it's a minor financial setback, but that's also just about it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how we can make sure that dying and being resurrected is something that is actually tense, exciting, and fun, or at least dramatic, in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. The issue of resurrection is something that we've talked a lot about at my table, and something that we are actually also including new rules for in our book, HERETIC'S Guide to Devotion and Divinity, which is going to be live, or is already live, depending on when you watch this, on Kickstarter. And it's a book basically about everything divine, including resurrections, where we will be providing new rules for how you can handle resurrections, and also a lot of additional cool content such as celestial monsters, divine magic items, relic hunts, mini adventures, divine NPCs, religious cults, and a bunch of cool stuff that you can use to make the divine feel real. So if that sounds interesting to you, please check out the link in the description down below. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at how resurrection works in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Well, basically it just works. That's it. If the character knows the spell and can cast it, they can use Raise Dead, Revivify, Resurrection, all those spells to bring a dead character back to life. There are some rules for high-level resurrection spells that may have penalties when you come back and stuff like that, but these are typically minor and quite quickly gotten out of the way, so it's not something that is ever going to be a huge issue. There are some costs associated with resurrections typically, but these gold costs are relatively minor, at least for most tables. And so what, you might ask, what is the issue? Well, the issue is that if resurrections are really easy and there's no real penalties or consequences, well, then it doesn't really matter that your character dies. So basically, I think that there is a multitude of different ways that we can make resurrection feel more tense, dramatic, more feared by the players. The first solution is adding in a lasting consequence to having died. That's something we have seen in early editions where characters would lose a whole level, they'd lose experience, they'd lose constitution, for example. So of course it's going to make dying something that players actually fear, even if they can't get resurrected, but it's also something that's just going to make that playing experience less fun going forward if you're always one level behind the other characters, for example. So I'm generally not a fan of that solution, but it is a solution you can implement. Another solution you may have seen is the Mad Mercer solution, and that's basically just making resurrections more difficult and more dramatic by having the other player characters chime in, sort of make checks to see if they can bring the deceased character back to life. Basically, there's a check associated with it. If you're going to try to quickly revivify someone in the middle of combat, you have to make a check to see if you succeed. If you don't succeed, you can use a more powerful spell to resurrect them out of combat, and that's going to be something where other player characters are going to have to chime in and make skill checks or make different sorts of checks, and the DC of that is variable. It's something you have to decide, and you have to decide whether or not there's advantage, all that kinds of stuff. And then finally, the DC for resurrecting a character is going to increase with each attempt. And then there's a caveat here where True Resurrection and Wish are always going to succeed no matter what. So while I may have some nitpicks about these rules, like them being a bit too complicated maybe, and I don't feel like True Resurrection and Wish should really circumvent the other rules for it, I do think that these rules in concept work really well, and you could take these rules, apply them to a game, and I think you would have a lot of fun with them. Now, what we've done at my table is that we've implemented these rules, but changed them slightly and made them a lot less complicated, basically. The rules that I'm running with is that when you try to resurrect a deceased character, you will have to make a spellcasting ability check against a DC of 10 plus the character's level. Now, you do get to add the level of the resurrection spell you're using to your spellcasting ability check. So basically, you're rolling the same as you would for a spell attack, except that you get to add, for example, 5 if you're casting Raise Dead at level 5. And then let's say the characters are level 9. The DC for that would be 19. So you're rolling, let's say, plus 7, plus 5 from the Raise Dead. That's a total of 12. You have to roll a 7 or above to succeed and successfully bring the character back to life. Now, if you fail, you can freely try again. There's no issue here, but the DC increases by 1 for each attempt. So each time you attempt to resurrect a character and you fail, the DC increases by 1, and each time you attempt to resurrect a character and succeed, the DC also increases by 1. And what this simple rule does is just that even if you die and are resurrected, it's going to be just a little bit tougher to resurrect you the next time. And while you can continue trying, resurrection spells always come with a monetary cost, so it's going to be more expensive with each attempt. So it's a minor change, but it's something that accomplishes the same as the Mad Mercer rule, but it's just less complicated and doesn't necessarily involve skill checks and all that to convince the character to come back to life if your group or your table is not into that. So same kind of rule, just a bit different. And the final solution I can recommend is that you sometimes at least make resurrections into wholesale encounters. That's something that we're introducing in our upcoming book, Heretic's Guide to Devotion and Divinity. There's still a link to that in the description down below where you can sign up to get notified when it goes live. But anyway, that's something we introduced in that book where we have Soul Splinter Sprite, for example, which are these creatures that are splinters of a character's soul or a creature's soul that the DM can have spawn when the character is resurrected or when someone attempts to resurrect the character or after the character has been resurrected. Splinters of its soul are still present and need to be defeated and caught and unified with the character's soul before the resurrection is truly complete or before the character is once again whole again. And I'm obviously biased because I was involved in designing these Soul Splinter Sprites, but I do think they're a really fun concept because they take on personality traits of the character they're spawned from. So if that was a very prideful and greedy character, for example, this sprite would have different traits than if it was a very compassionate and patient or humble character. Just throwing out adjectives here, but the point is it can have different abilities. It uses the character's proficiency bonus to determine how much hit point and damage it has, so it scales very easily with the character's level. There's many different ways you can implement something like Soul Splinter Sprites, but it's something that could really add an extra layer of excitement to the resurrection process. And that's something we're going to have more of in the book Heretic's Guide to Devotion and Divinity, but also something you can of course come up with on your own if you feel like maybe you need to travel into the afterlife to get the character back. Maybe there's a dream vision where you get into the character's soul and you fight aspects of that character within a dream dimension. There's a ton of different ways to do it, but the point is making it an actual challenge, making it an actual encounter to try and resurrect a character is a really fun way to do it and something that will make that moment feel really special. If you have any solution or house rules of your own that you'd like to share, please sound off in the comments down below. And if you like the content, you can of course also like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.